To some, it's a tropical paradise, complete with crystal blue waters, world-renowned diving, at least when raw sewage isn't being dumped into the ocean, and soft, sandy beaches. To others, who won't be making it back home, it's their tombstone. Welcome to Death Island, Thailand. Also known to locals as Koh Tao, which translates to Turtle Island, Koh Tao is located approximately 50 miles from mainland Thailand, and even for islands is rather small, measuring approximately 4 miles long and only about 2 miles wide. Koh Tao is home to about 2,000 full-time residents, including Burmese migrant workers and European expatriates. Prior to COVID, the island was said to receive approximately 500,000 visitors per year. And like tourism in much of Southeast Asia, this number has dropped dramatically in recent years. Behind the golden sandy beaches, there is a very dark side to this island, in the land of smiles, which is how Thailand likes to market itself. A dark side that has resulted in over 24 people mysteriously dying in rather gruesome ways or victims to completely avoidable accidents. One of the more intriguing murder mysteries in the last decade is that of 30-year-old Belgium tourist Elise Dallemagne, whose partially eaten body was discovered on April 28, 2017, when locals became suspicious of a monitor lizard acting strangely. The lizard was said to be repeatedly walking into and out of the jungle. This led locals to finding Ms. Dellemagne's partially eaten body. But almost immediately, there were inconsistencies in how Ms. Dallemagne had died. Koh Tao police stated Ms. Dallemagne was found hanging from a tree, and that she was not partially eaten. Other reports stated Ms. Dallemagne was found on the ground, wrapped in rags with a fuel container nearby, and that her body had been partially eaten by reptiles. Yet to this day, no known crime scene photos exist. Not even Ms. Dellemagne's mother knows under what circumstances her daughter's body was found. The silence from the Koh Tao Police Department only fueled people's suspicions and the family's anger. Reviewing news reports from 2017, we can try to piece together what might have happened. Ms. Dallemagne has spent about 2 years traveling Southeast Asia. She previously completed her college education in medicine with the European Institute of Medicine and had been living on the nearby island of Koh Phagan with members of a Hindu cult who believed their leader was reincarnated. Though this might sound odd, it is probably easier to find a Buddhist or Hindu temple in Southeast Asia than it is to find a Christian or Catholic church. After traveling throughout Asia, Ms. Dallemagne was said to be heading back home to Belgium with plans of finding employment and saving money, possibly to fund a return trip to Asia. Ms. Dallemagne left Koh Phagan by ferry, bound for mainland Thailand on April 17, 2017. The ferry made a stop at Koh Tao, and for unknown reasons, Ms. Dallemagne got off and proceeded to check into the Triple B bungalows next to Mayhead Pier. And this is the point where her life begins to quickly spiral out of control. The Triple B bungalows are listed on hostelworld.com and at the time cost about $10 per night, a relative bargain compared to many other parts of the world. Though, as we will see in this case and many others, this bargain does come with a price. Upon checking into the Triple D bungalows, on the check-in sheet, Ms. Dallemagne crossed out her real last name and signed in under a fake name as Ms. Dubois. And she also forgot to provide her passport ID number. This is odd for 2 reasons. First, the police, who were unable to take crime scene pictures, yet Somehow they were able to take pictures of the check-in sheet at the Triple B bungalows, which oddly enough does cast some suspicion on Ms. Dallemagne herself. And secondly, it's speculated that Ms. Dallemagne either possibly overstayed her visa and was trying to avoid problems, or she may have been trying to hide from someone. We don't know and can only speculate. But it just keeps getting worse. 2 days later, on April 19th, a fire burned Ms. Dallemagne's bamboo hut and damaged two other structures. It's believed the fire started in Ms. Dallemagne's bedroom and was caused by a candle. Most news reports at the time seemed to gloss over this incident, but I think it's an extremely important clue in this case, and I would like to return to this later. Ms. Dallemagne was then said to have fled 2 miles through the jungle to the opposite side of the island and checked into another lodging at Tenote Bay. Now, let's just stop here for a moment and think about this. For a second, just imagine yourself in Ms. Dallemagne's shoes. You're in a foreign country. You're by yourself, probably low on money, and your bamboo hut just burned down. What do? Do you wait for the police? You probably should. But some people in this situation might panic, and that would probably make things even worse. Your mind is racing. Are you going to be in trouble? Are you going to be tossed into a Thai jail? What are jails like in Thailand? For a moment, put yourself in Ms. Dallemagne's shoes. What would you have done? We don't know if Ms. Dallemagne spoke with the police or if she did in fact just panicked and fled through the jungle to the other side of the island. But we do know she did make it to the other side of the island that night and then checked into the Poseidon Resort, which is rather ironic in this case because the word Poseidon means Greek for God, which is probably what you would need just to safely get out of the situation that she was in. And anyway, the Poseidon Resort is a rather modest motel, and at the time cost approximately $12 per night. The next morning, which would have been April 20th, 2017, she then purchased another ticket for the ferry to the mainland, leaving it in 4 days on April 24th. At this point, Ms. Dallemagne might have been feeling a sense of relief. Maybe she thought the worst was over and that she could blissfully enjoy the last part of her vacation before making her journey back home to Europe. It didn't look like she was in a big hurry to leave the island at this point. But unfortunately, the reality was much different. Ms. Dallemagne would never make it to the ferry leaving for the mainland. Her partially eaten body would be found 8 days later on April 28, 2017. And the mystery of what happened to Ms. Dallemagne remains to this day. A mystery which is primarily the result of Thai police incompetence and corruption. The police could have taken pictures of the crime scene, but chose not to. The police could have had an autopsy done, but again, they chose not to. Why? Ms. Dallemagne's mother, who spoke with her daughter via Skype less than 2 weeks earlier, said she doesn't believe her daughter committed suicide, but that she was murdered, and the Koh Tao police are covering up a murder. And remember the fire earlier at Ms. Dallemagne's bamboo hut? The fire that was believed to have started in her room? Ms. Dallemagne was likely in serious trouble whether she knew it or not. Farang must pay. Farang is a Thai slang word that means basically anyone who is a foreigner and is typically applied to white foreigners. Though rude, most people suggest not to argue with Thais because they can be very short-tempered and you don't want to make them lose face, which is like a Thai expression. You don't want to embarrass somebody. There's no written studies on this subject, it's just basically common knowledge. At this point, with the information we have available, I think in the best case scenario, Ms. Dallemagne probably would have wound up in a Thai jail, maybe for a few months or possibly maybe just a few weeks. And though I'm not a Thai lawyer, I do know that criminal trials in Thailand, if you are lucky enough to get one, are conducted by judges only. There are no jury trials. So basically, if there's any shred of evidence that you look guilty, then you probably don't have much of a chance once you're in court. And she probably would have had to have paid something to replace the bamboo huts. I'm just guessing maybe a couple $1,000s. And then if she survived the Thai jail, she would have been deported back to Belgium, which of course would have been much, much better than how things turned out. But I seriously doubt Ms. Dallemagne or anyone else in this situation would be able to just walk away scot-free without paying something. You got to keep in mind, life is rather cheap in this part of the world, but bamboo huts, not so much. Though there's no reports that Ms. Dallemagne tried to contact her family for help or even her embassy for legal assistance, I'm not really sure if it would have been that easy for her to do so. I checked my own embassy's website in Thailand, the U.S. Embassy, and there's only one phone number listed with no email address. And who's to say that if you were in trouble and you try calling that phone number, that that phone isn't just ringing off the hook all day with dozens of people in similar situations as yours or even worse. And so even with hindsight being 2020, I think Ms. Dallemagne, she was in a very difficult situation. And if her only form of communication was through Skype, which does require internet access, it's not really clear if she even had the ability to communicate with others, even if she wanted to at that point. So her fate in some ways might have been sealed. She really might not have been able to reach out to get help. And as far as the Koh Tao police or the Thai police, I doubt they would have helped her in this situation. Not only in Koh Tao, but just in Thailand in general, the police are very corrupt. For example, there's a report by the Asian Human Rights Commission which details how the Thai government basically orchestrated and planned the mass execution of over 2,000 civilians in 2003 in their so-called war on drugs. And so basically what they did is they made a list of anyone who was suspected of being a drug dealer or being involved with drugs, and they just went out in the streets and executed whoever was unfortunate enough to wind up on this blacklist. And when speaking about drug dealers or anyone suspected of being involved with drugs, the Thai Interior Minister stated, "They will be put behind bars or even vanish without a trace. Who cares? They are destroying our country." So that just kind of gives you an insight in how some of the government officials think. Just basically, if there's a problem, you can just make these people vanish, and sometimes vanish without a trace. But in this situation, they did it pretty openly. And in addition to the mass murder of over 2,000 people, over 50,000 people were arrested during a 2-month time span from February 1st, 2003 to March 31st. And many of the people who were arrested, they simply turned themselves in at the Thai police stations because they were so terrified of just being arbitrarily executed on the street. And the Asian Human Rights Report goes on to list numerous examples of such murders by the Thai government. One report states, on the evening of January 31st, 2003, Ban Ray residents Boon Shui and his girlfriend Yupin were returning home with their 8-year-old son Jurizik. All three were riding home on one motorcycle when two men wearing ski masks pulled alongside them and opened fire, killing Boon Shui and his girlfriend Yupin. Their 8-year-old son was not hit. Boon Shui had just recently been released from prison after serving 18 months for a drug-related charge, and his girlfriend Yupin was also said to be on some sort of a drug blacklist. And it's clear from the Prime Minister's statements that life is rather cheap in this part of the world. And I'm not necessarily trying to single out Thailand, as there's other countries such as neighboring Cambodia, which probably has a much worse history of civil unrest and murder. But getting back to how life is cheap, another family of murdered tourists, which I haven't covered yet, the murder of both Hannah Witheridge and David Miller, which occurred about 3 years earlier. The murdered victim's family, they reported being told some rather strange things by Thai court officials, and the Thai court people were quoted as saying, "Why are you here? She is dead already. Just go home and make another one. Why are you making such a fuss? She will be back in 30 days as something else. She may have better luck next time." And that's referring to the Buddhist belief that all people are reincarnated 30 days after death. So, as you can probably see, going to court in Thailand isn't necessarily always the answer to resolving these situations, or even trying to get help. And the small irony of all this is Miss Dallemagne likely would have known about that case, the death of Hannah Witheridge and David Miller, and also probably many of the other tourist murders on both Koh Tao and in Thailand, as she is to have been reported to have traveled throughout Southeast Asia for about 2 years. Ms. Dallemagne would have also likely have heard about some of the lesser known murders on Death Island, such as that of French National Dimitri Povse, who was found hanged on his bungalow porch on January 1st, 2015, which would have been a little bit more than 2 years before Ms. Dallemagne herself was found murdered. And what makes the death of Mr. Povse gruesome is that he was found hanging with his hands tied behind his back. And, when I first saw this picture, the first thing that came to my mind was maybe someone is trying to pull a prank here. How can you hang yourself with your hands tied behind your back? And even with these pictures, the Koh Tao police, they still feel that it's not suspicious that he somehow did hang himself with his hands tied behind his back. And as far as the not being loose, how do they know that that didn't happen after he was in that life or death struggle, after he was hung, that the knot didn't just loosen itself? I mean, it looks to me like this person was almost tortured. And also to note, there appears to be a rather large bruise on one of Mr. Pov's arms, but the Koh Tao police, they ignored that evidence, and they still feel that Mr. Povse hung himself. And aside from the crime scene photos, we really don't have too much background on Mr. Povse or what he was doing in Koh Tao. There's not a whole lot of information available online. It was said that Mr. Povse was out the night before to celebrate New Year's Eve with friends at the next door bar, and these are pictures of the next door bar. And he then continued his celebrations at the Experience Festival, which is basically an outdoor party, and that was about a mile from the next door bar. And then at some point early on New Year's Day, he returned home and was shortly afterwards found hanging from his porch. And also a suicide note was found at his residence, and it stated, "Iris, I love you. Suicide seems easy, but it is actually difficult." And it was just that, supposedly, that brief note written in French that was found at Mr. Pov's residence. And a woman who Mr. Povs had been interested in said Mr. Povs called her twice the night before, but she did not answer her phone because she was sleeping. And as far as what Mr. Povs was doing on Death Island, what kind of work he did, just background about his life, we really don't know. There's just so little information available about some of these cases. Like many of the crime victims in Thailand, it's almost like the person never existed. That once did, even if they're murdered, you're now some sort of a burden, someone who's going to ruin someone else's good time. You're going to ruin someone else's vacation. And I think it should almost be a crime that there's so little bit of information available about some of these cases. And I put much of the blame on on the various state departments for not making this information public. There's really no information about some of these people, and it makes me wonder if their state departments even looked into this. How did this person die? What happened? Do they even care? And when they do find out how the person died, these crime reports, they should be made public, so people who visit these third world countries, they know about more what they're getting into. And then, you might say, well, what if they do the same thing about, the cities in the United States? What about places like Detroit or Chicago, the murder capitals of the U.S.? And I think the same thing would apply there too. Don't go to certain areas. The south side of Chicago is like a third world country, or a lot of the city of Detroit is a third world country. Avoid those places. And so I think some things should be changed besides outside of Thailand, and of course a lot should be changed inside of Thailand. And I just want to say before closing, may Mr. Povs and Ms. Dallemagne rest in peace, and thank you for watching.